One sentence. That's all it took to stop the most powerful woman in the city dead in her tracks. It wasn't a threat from a business rival or a warning from her board of directors. It was a single, desperate shout from the one person nobody in the gleaming towers of Vance Innovations ever noticed. A voice that cut through the sterile afternoon air of the executive parking garage, changing everything in an instant. In that one moment, a life was saved, a sinister plot was exposed, and the very soul of a billion-dollar corporation was thrown into question. Standing between the polished chrome of a limousine and the shadow of the man holding the door was a janitor, his hands still damp, his voice cracking with an urgency that defied his station. He yelled, his voice echoing off the concrete, a plea that would ignite a revolution no one saw coming, "Don't get in the car." Section 1, The Man in the Shadows. James Harris was a man of routine. His life moved to a quiet, steady beat. The 5:30 a.m. alarm, soft enough not to wake his daughter, Maya. The gentle shake of her shoulder at 7 a.m., the smell of toast, and the sound of her laughter filling their small apartment. The walk to the school bus, her small hand in his, a daily ritual that anchored his world. Then, the city bus downtown to the towering glass monolith of Vance Innovations, where his second life began. At Vance Innovations, James wasn't a father, a dreamer, or a thinker. He was a function. The whisper of a mop on marble, the hum of a floor buffer in an empty hall, the ghost who emptied the trash of people earning more in an hour than he did in a month. To the ambitious executives and sharp-witted analysts who strode the halls, he was basically invisible. And honestly, he preferred it that way. Invisibility was his shield. It let him observe, listen, and exist without the weight of expectation. He learned the company's rhythms not from memos, but from discarded coffee cups and the nervous energy before a board meeting. He could tell the company's mood by the state of the third-floor break room. He knew who was stressed from the gnawed-on pens in their trash and who was celebrating from the faint scent of champagne in the air. He was the building's silent witness. His own dreams were tucked away. He'd once been an engineering student, fascinated by how systems connected, how the smallest gear could turn the largest wheel. But life, as it often does, had other plans. Raising Maya on his own had reshaped his priorities, turning a future of blueprints into a present of cleaning solvents. Still, the engineer's mind never really switched off. He'd find himself tracing the building's HVAC systems, diagnosing a rattle in the service elevator, or noticing the subtle flicker in a light that signaled a failing ballast. He saw the building not as a structure, but as a living thing, and he was one of its quiet caretakers. His greatest pride and deepest worry was Maya. She was a brilliant, curious 7-year-old with his eyes and a spirit all her own. She was the reason for the long hours and the aching back. He wanted a world for her that was bigger than their apartment, a world where she would be seen, her potential limitless. He felt the sting of his position most when he thought of her. He didn't want her to see him as the world saw him, just a janitor. He wanted her to see a man of integrity, a man who did the right thing, no matter how small the task. Section 2, The Woman on the Throne. Miles above James, in a corner office that seemed to float among the clouds, sat Eleanor Vance. Her world couldn't have been more different from his. It was a world of high-stakes decisions and billion-dollar consequences. Her name was on the building, a legacy from her father she had worked tirelessly to surpass. Vance Innovations was a tech and logistics juggernaut, and Eleanor was its undisputed queen. She was sharp, demanding, and possessed a mind that moved at light speed. She was respected, feared, and admired from a distance. But she was also isolated. Her view was of horizons and 5-year plans, not the foundational details below. Her relationships were governed by profit and loss. She knew the names of her top 50 executives, biggest shareholders, and most dangerous competitors. But the name of the man who cleaned her office every night? She didn't have a clue. Lately, the pressure had been immense. A rival firm, led by the ruthless Marcus Thorne, was attempting a hostile takeover. For months, Eleanor had been in a state of perpetual war, fighting him in the boardroom and in the press. The fight was taking its toll. She was sleeping less, and the stress lines around her eyes were deepening. Her leadership style, once praised as efficient, was now being called cold. She demanded perfection but rarely offered praise, seeing her employees as assets, cogs in the machine she commanded. This wasn't because of malice, but because of privilege and pressure. She'd never worried about the cost of groceries or the quiet dignity of an honest day's labor. Her problems were abstract, played out on spreadsheets. The people who made her world run smoothly, the assistants, the security guards, the cleaning staff, were part of the infrastructure, as essential but as unnoticed as the electricity. The day of the incident was particularly grueling. She had just finished a tense, 7-hour meeting, shoring up support against Thorne's latest maneuver. She felt a rare, fragile sense of victory. As she strode towards the executive garage, her mind was already on the next battle. Her driver, a man she'd employed for a decade, held the door to her armored limousine. She reached for the handle, her thoughts a million miles away, when a raw, unfamiliar voice shattered her concentration. "Don't get in the car." The shout was so out of place in the hushed garage that Eleanor thought she'd imagined it. Her hand froze. Her driver turned, annoyed. And then she saw him. James Harris stepped out from behind a concrete pillar, his mop and bucket abandoned. His uniform, a symbol of his invisibility, now made him stand out. There was no apology in his eyes, only a terrifying certainty. "What is the meaning of this?" her driver barked, stepping forward. "Get back to your post." James ignored him, his eyes locked on Eleanor. "Ma'am," he said, his voice intense. "Please. Step away from the vehicle. Just for a moment." Eleanor's mind, trained to see threats in market shares, struggled to process what was happening. This was a breach of protocol. A delay she didn't have time for. Who was this man to command her? "I'm late for a meeting," she said, her voice clipped. "It can wait," James insisted, stepping closer. "Ma'am, I clean this garage every day. I know every oil stain, every tire mark. For the last week, I've seen a different van parked in that corner. It always leaves 5 minutes after you do. But today, it left 5 minutes before you came down." Eleanor stared at him. It was such a small, irrelevant detail. And when I was sweeping near your car," he continued, his voice dropping to a whisper, "I noticed something. A wire. It's tiny. Tucked up under the chassis, right below the driver's side door. It's clean. Too clean. Everything else under there has a layer of road dust. This wire, it looks brand new. An engineer's eye for detail. A janitor's observation." The conviction in his voice began to penetrate her armor of skepticism. The image of the clean wire flashed in her mind. Something was deeply, fundamentally wrong. She looked from James's pleading face to the impassive steel of her car. For the first time in years, a primal fear prickled her skin. She took a step back. "Call security," she ordered her driver, her voice suddenly thin. "Tell them to clear this level. And call the police. Tell them we have a possible explosive device." The driver's jaw went slack. The garage suddenly felt alive with unseen menace. He fumbled for his shaking phone. James Harris didn't move, a lone sentinel with a mop bucket, his gaze fixed on the spot where a single, clean wire represented the boundary between life and death. The world, for Eleanor Vance, had stopped. And in the deafening silence, she knew with a chilling certainty that the man she had never seen before had just saved her life. The next 3 hours were a blur of controlled chaos. Sirens wailed. The garage was sealed. A bomb squad descended into the concrete depths. On the upper floors, employees pressed against the windows, a mixture of fear and curiosity on their faces. Eleanor watched from the police command post in the lobby. She gave her statement, her voice steady, betraying none of the seismic shock she felt inside. She recounted James's warning, his strange, specific observation about the clean wire. The lead detective, a grizzled man named Miller, listened intently. James was questioned in a small security office. Under the sterile lights, he was just a janitor again, out of his depth. He patiently repeated his story, the strange van, the detail of the wire. Some officers looked at him with suspicion. How would a janitor know to look for that? But Detective Miller saw the unvarnished truth. Your company should give you a raise, Miller grunted as the interview ended. You've got good eyes. An hour later, the bomb squad leader emerged. It was a sophisticated device, Ms. Vance, he said. Pressure activated. Connected to the door. Whoever opened it would have triggered a shaped charge powerful enough to obliterate the vehicle and everything within a 20-foot radius. Obliterate. The clinical word sent a fresh wave of ice through Eleanor's veins. She thought of her hand, inches from the handle. She looked across the lobby and saw James Harris, standing awkwardly by a wall, looking small and lost. The company was in an uproar. Who would do this? Eleanor knew with a sickening certainty this had the cold precision of Marcus Thorne. Proving it was another matter. That night, Eleanor couldn't sleep. She kept replaying the scene in the garage. He hadn't just seen a wire. He had seen a detail that her drivers, her bodyguards, and her multi-million-dollar security system had all missed. The janitor had noticed. A man she wouldn't have recognized in the hall. The thought was a crack in the foundation of her worldview. She had built her empire on hierarchy, yet her life had been saved by the man at the absolute bottom of that pyramid. A man whose job was to be unnoticeable. The paradox gnawed at her. She started to wonder, what else wasn't she seeing? Who else was she not seeing? Her company, she realized, was a reflection of her own blindness. A place where titles mattered more than talent. She realized that Marcus Thorne's attack wasn't just a threat to her life, it was a symptom of a sickness within her own company. A culture of arrogance and ignorance she herself had created. The investigation into the bomb was a police matter. The investigation into her company had just begun, and she would be its lead detective. Section 5, The Shockwave. The next day, the tension in Vance Innovations was palpable. The news had been contained, but inside, the story of James Harris, the janitor, had become a legend. Some whispered he was a former secret agent. The truth? That he was simply an observant man who cared enough to speak up. It seemed too simple, too normal to be true. James arrived for his shift to find himself the subject of stares. Colleagues who had never given him a second glance now nodded with respect. He was flustered by the attention and just wanted to start his rounds. Meanwhile, Eleanor moved with a startling clarity of purpose. She had security pull all surveillance footage from the past 2 weeks. Cross-referencing it with James's information, they got a hit. The mysterious van was registered to a shell corporation. A few hours later, her forensic accounting team found the link, the corporation traced back to a holding company owned by Marcus Thorne. The smoking gun. She called a mandatory, all-hands company meeting for the next afternoon. The memo was vague, fueling speculation. As employees filed into the grand auditorium, they saw it was everyone. Programmers sat next to cafeteria workers, marketers next to mailroom clerks. In the back, trying to make himself invisible, was James Harris, who had been asked to attend in his regular clothes. Eleanor Vance walked onto the stage. A hush fell. She looked different, her corporate armor gone. Yesterday, she began, her voice strong, I almost died. A collective gasp went through the audience. I was saved, she continued, not by our expensive security systems, not by my bodyguards, not by any of our protocols. I was saved by the observation and the courage of one person. She paused. I have spent my entire career looking up, looking at the bottom line. I prided myself on seeing the big picture. In doing so, I failed to see the people who are the true foundation of this company. Her eyes found him. James Harris, would you please come up here? Murmurs rippled through the crowd as James, his heart pounding, made his way to the stage. He stood awkwardly beside the most powerful woman he had ever met. Eleanor turned to him. Mr. Harris, you noticed something no one else did. You had the courage to speak up, to risk being dismissed. You did the right thing because it was the right thing to do. There is no reward that can adequately thank you for my life. She turned back to the audience. The device in my car was an act of terror by a man who sought to take this company by force because he could not win it by merit. Our investigation has revealed that the man behind this is Marcus Thorne. More gasps. In the third row, Marcus Thorne himself went pale. The police are on their way to his office as we speak, Eleanor declared. Applause erupted, but she held up a hand. But this isn't just about him. This is about us. This incident has exposed a dangerous flaw in our culture. We have brilliant, observant people at every level whose voices we have ignored. That ends today. This was the pivot no one saw coming. I am creating a new department at Vance Innovations, she announced. The Department of Operational Integrity. Its sole purpose will be to see the things we have been blind to and listen to the voices we have ignored. It will report directly to me. And its first director will be the man who has already proven he is the most qualified person on earth for the job. She looked directly at James Harris. Mr. Harris, I am offering you the position of Director of Operational Integrity, effective immediately. Your starting salary will be 5 times what you currently make, with full executive benefits and a corner office on the 40th floor. But more importantly, you will have a mandate from me to help me fix this company. To help me build a place where every employee feels seen, valued, and empowered to speak up, just as you did. The auditorium was utterly silent. Jaws were on the floor. People stared, dumbfounded, at the janitor and the CEO. James looked as if he'd been struck by lightning. Finally, he found his voice, a bare whisper. I don't know what to say. Say you'll help me, James, Eleanor said, her voice softening. Help me see. A slow smile spread across James's face, a smile of shock and a dawning, wonderful new reality. He stood up straighter, looking out at the people of Vance Innovations not as a janitor, but as a leader. Yes, he said, his voice gaining strength. I will. The silence broke. A single person clapped, then another, and then the entire auditorium erupted in a thunderous, standing ovation. It was the sound of a culture beginning to break, and a new one being born. Section 6, The New Reality. The promotion of James Harris was a corporate earthquake. Of course, there was disbelief. And cynicism. In some corners, there was outright resentment. How could a janitor run a department? It was a publicity stunt, some sneered. But they underestimated both Eleanor and James. Eleanor gave James her unwavering support. She knew he didn't have a business degree, but he had something rarer, unimpeachable integrity and a perspective untainted by executive groupthink. James, for his part, was terrified. He spent the first week in his new, cavernous office feeling like an imposter. The suit felt like a costume. Then, he thought of Maya. He thought about why Eleanor had chosen him. Not for what he knew, but for how he saw. So, he decided to start there. He left his office and began to walk. He didn't walk the executive floors. He went to the basement, the loading docks, the third shift factory floor, the mailroom. He visited the cleaning staff, his former colleagues. He didn't come with a clipboard. He just came with a coffee pot and a willingness to listen. He asked simple questions. What's the most frustrating part of your day? What would you fix if you could? What's a problem everyone knows about but no one talks about? Slowly, they began to talk. The loading dock foreman told him about a recurring software bottleneck that cost the company thousands a week, a problem he tried to report for months. A woman on the assembly line showed him a simple tool she had invented to make her job safer. A night guard pointed out a critical blind spot in the server room surveillance. These were the clean wires. James collected them, documented them, and analyzed them with a practical, engineering-focused mind. He presented his first report to Eleanor in a simple conversation. He told her the stories. He called it the Harris Initiative, a formal, anonymous system for any employee at any level to report problems and suggestions, with a guarantee that every submission would be reviewed. Eleanor implemented every single one of his initial suggestions. The software was patched. The new tool was prototyped. The camera was installed. The results were immediate. Efficiency went up. Costs went down. Morale began to climb. The cynics fell silent. They saw the foreman get a bonus and a public commendation. They saw the woman from the assembly line get a budget to develop other tools. James wasn't a stunt, he was a conduit. He was making the invisible, visible. He was teaching the company how to see with 1,000 pairs of eyes. For James, the greatest change wasn't the office or the salary. It was the walk to the school bus with Maya. One evening, as he tucked her into bed, she looked up at him. "Daddy," she asked, "are you a superhero at your work?" James smiled, a deep, genuine smile of a man who had finally found his place. "No, sweetie," he said, kissing her forehead. "I just listen. It turns out, that's almost the same thing." CTA and conclusion. The story of James Harris and Eleanor Vance became a legend at Vance Innovations, a modern corporate fable. The company didn't just survive, it emerged stronger and more human.